Welcome back to the BestWorst42 podcast. I'm your host, Josh Walewa. My next guest is the chef owner of Bengelina Hospitality Group. It was some amazing dining and retail experiences offered by the Commissary, Olio, Nixta, the Benevolent King, and just so many more. Those are just a few. He's amassed an amazing business career. He has experience as a culinary educator, an entrepreneur, and he makes really delicious food. I can definitely speak from personal experience. Welcome, Ben Poremba.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, I kind of in my introduction talked about the different retail spaces, restaurants. Can you talk to me a little bit more about the Bengelina Hospitality Group and what you do there?
So Bengelina stands for Ben and Angelina, which is my wife. We created this company in shortly after we met and started dating back in 2007, with the idea of going into the world of the food business. I wanted to open a restaurant. Our first venture was actually a partnership with another St. Louis native, Mark Sanfilippo, and we opened up an Italian style cured meat business. First, we were selling our cured meats at farmers markets, and then we had a brick and mortar, and we sold some sandwiches. But the idea was that we were hand making all these salamis and other Italian cured meats. And then a couple of years later, I opened up Olio and Elia, and here in the Botanical Heights neighborhood, which was then known as McCreetown. And, very early on, as I opened this, I realized that going into a neighborhood that was basically left behind, that was forgotten, that was abandoned, whatever the terminology you want to use, that was blighted. I mean, there's all these different characteristics, but, a place that didn't have much life, didn't have much activity, meant that I was a destination, and and destinations are risky for businesses. You don't get regular traffic, and so I knew already back then that density of business is something that I had to do, giving more people more reasons to come to that neighborhood. So even the opening of Olio and Elia meant that I was opening two separate businesses at the same time. One that was really exclusive and special in Elia, a fine dining restaurant. And then the other was kind of an everyday spot. You can come for lunch, you can come for dinner, you can come with your flip-flops. And then quickly after that, I partnered with Simone Four, and we opened La Patisserie Chouquet together. So yet another place that people can come in for a completely different experience. So a little more breakfast. They can come in to order their wedding cakes, their birthday cakes. And so in a matter of 3 months, we had 3 businesses in 2 corners, in a place in town that, until then had very, very little traffic, right? And so that captured the attention of a lot of people, and the story started, of me understanding that, I like personally, I love the creativity behind opening a business. Imagining what place is going to look like, creating, finding a name, creating the logo, all the creative process. But I also really enjoy the business side of things, the entrepreneurial side of things, working with numbers and kind of, putting together business plans. Not that they all really were accurate, but I love the handling of it. I love the idea of thinking about that and really, digging in and digging deep. And so you asked, I sort of veered from your question, but the idea was, I created space and I knew how to cook. I know restaurants. I wanted, but I think that when you go, you engage, you partake in the experience of going out to eat or even shopping, which now you could do online. You could do it very easily. You don't have to go anywhere really. So those experiences got to be immersive, right? That's the word I use, in the sense that they have to be choreographed. You gotta almost think of yourself as a participant in some kind of a stage act. The music, the smells, the uniforms of the people, everything adds to that experience. You're walking into an experience, and that's how I started thinking of myself as a stage designer. And I didn't want to stop at restaurants. I wanted to, explore retail and explore other venues. So that's a long answer to your very specific question.
Well, it was great. This often happens, and so many other questions and thoughts I want to explore with you on this particular topic and what you just shared. One of them is this idea of density of business, and I'm not a business person. This is not my background at all, but my understanding, of course, of the concept of, like, let's say there's a jewelry store that opens in a particular area. It's not the worst thing for other jewelers to open up shops around that area because it brings a larger crowd and everybody does well. I've noticed, especially around Olio and Elia, now there are other businesses there. So that space must have grown based on what you started. And I'm kind of curious if that was kind of a driving strategy or tactic, or did you think that other people would join you in that space?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a strategy. It was definitely something that I had a gut for lack of a better word. I felt like, I got to do this. I got to open more businesses here. And if I do it, maybe others will come. But once I opened my 3 businesses like I said, in a 3-month period of time, I realized this has to become a strategy. This is whether I planned it as such or not. It's a model on how to activate a neighborhood. And so it sort of worked. And so no, it wasn't a strategy, but it became kind of. Then we sort of understood that this is a moving train, and we're driving it, and we know where we're going with it. So,
yeah, be careful what you wish for, but obviously this is all good things. So again, one of the things about that as well, you said activating a neighborhood. And that's one of the things I really love about the St. Louis area. For listeners who've never been here, we're a city of neighborhoods. And, you can live in an apartment or house and then be within walking distance to your favorite restaurant or one of your favorite restaurants or bars or art galleries, et cetera. There's businesses really all around. And I can imagine when you activated this area, I don't know, has it impacted the housing market around that area? I'm not sure how that's worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those went, the growth of my business and the growth of the real estate market here in this neighborhood was done in tandem. I mean, people bought houses not because of my restaurant, but I think it definitely played a role in people's perception of where they're moving. Oh my God, we have now a coffee shop around the corner, and we have a beautiful restaurant, and for young couples, it's romantic. You're buying your new house, you want to live in a city, you're close to a park. I mean, all those things kind of played a part in their decision making. So yeah, I mean, it went from a very neglected part of town to being a very sought after part of town. I'm a conscientious, at least I like to think of myself as a conscientious business developer or entrepreneur. And somebody said, what does it mean? Well, it meant that I am very careful and very conscientious about where I chose to stick my businesses, and I'm aware that I'm walking a very thin line of possibly gentrifying a neighborhood and possibly making it as such that people who grew up here or lived here and come from a socioeconomic background that might not afford themselves to stay around there. So I'm very aware, and those considerations definitely take part in my decision making. So but yeah, I mean, this neighborhood is booming, as they say.
Yeah. I mean, well, one of the things I've really enjoyed about St. Louis is some of the mixed neighborhoods where you do have people who've been there for generations, and you have newcomers who are coming, and businesses are booming all around it. So I think there is a way and there's a path towards being a conscientious entrepreneur. Again, in the description of kind of forgotten neighborhoods, blighted neighborhoods, and being able to really bringing some life and energy to it really is exciting to me. I'm curious about your path towards doing this, because you talk about 3 businesses in 3 months. To start one business in a lifetime for many people would be a dream. To do 3 in 3 months, that there has to be some steps in between being a young adult and there. And I'm kind of curious about your path.
I think that, when you're in it, you're kind of not aware of how risky some of these things are, and you're just in it, and so it was logical to me. It made sense, and so I just went for it. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of like when you. I don't know if you're if you're an athlete. I was a soccer player, and you hear a lot of it, from boxers and from that you do things and you're able to in boxing, like, suffer punishment that otherwise would be very, very difficult. But when you're in it, your adrenaline is up, and it's the same kind of thing. I was opening businesses. I poured all my creative efforts, that I've in my head collected over the years, and it felt good, and and there was a lot of buzz, and then just kind of there was an adrenaline there. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep going. I will tell you that a year later, I opened another business in the neighborhood, and it was very anticipated, and that business was very short lived. I mean, I failed. I had to change it and switch over, and so that was a little bit of a kind of a grounding experience. But I had to reflect about, like, my moves and my steps, and start considering other factors. But so yeah, I opened 4 of those businesses in a matter of less than 18 months. It was crazy.
Yeah, you were in the zone. When you said when you were talking about sports, the sports analogy, I played football growing up, American football, right? And I remember, you have so many months you play, and then you don't play the rest of the year. So you don't get that kind of contact. And every year in the summer, when we started preparing for it, you'd have to bump up against people, and your forearms and other parts of your body would start to get these bruises, and you were very sensitive to it. But the more you were into it, the less those things hurt. And eventually it was just a part of the game. And it really, the challenges, the struggles, the whatever, it didn't matter, because you're working towards something, and it was a lot of fun. And so I can appreciate being in that zone, and how being in that moment really takes a lot of the barriers away, or at least maybe mental barriers away.
Yeah, the mental barriers, exactly.
So where did you start off? What was your kind of thought process about going into the food business, into this industry, into retail? Kind of what was your path towards all of that?
Okay, so I mean, I'll give you a little background. I moved to St. Louis as a high school student. My dad took a job here with the idea that I, spend a year in high school here, and then go back and do mandatory military service in Israel. That didn't quite pan out. I sort of stayed here. I wanted to go to college. I went to college. I got a degree in philosophy. My mom is a lifelong culinary professional. She owned a small little restaurant. She had a big catering company in Israel. And so I was always interested in cooking, and more so also in the idea of hospitality. I know it's a kind of a word that's being thrown around a lot, but for me, what it meant is seeing what my mom and dad did at their home. We've always had guests. It was just a busy household. I mean, parents didn't live in a big apartment, but it was always busy. My dad was kind of, he was a IT engineer, but he was involved in a little bit of politics and that sort of thing. But we had people in our house for dinner 3-4 nights a week. And there seemed to be like just always things going on. And my mom, it was more, I mean, she always used to say to me as a kid, the food is nothing. I can cook. I mean, the food is, but it's everything else around it. It's setting the table and it's getting flowers and it's, picking the right tablecloth and, what kind of a dinner is it? Is it super formal? Is it super informal? What? And so that to me meant hospitality, like all these sort of, again, setting the stage for something, special, or a special experience. And so I really wanted to be in that world. I mean, I studied philosophy. In college, I graduated. I wanted to, I started graduate school. I wanted to maybe, do that. But that, I had this burning, thing for cooking. And so I started cooking for a family, believe it or not, while I was in school. And they were foodies and they let me sort of cook for them all kinds of interesting things. They were a very wealthy family and they had a very nice kitchen. And, the head of the family was like, just make that your lab. Just go play around. And he'd buy me cookbooks, which was a lot of fun. And, the girl, I mean, I cooked for a family, but I also nannied their girls. So this was 3 little girls. And for their birthdays, I would bake a cake or I'd, do a, outdoor backyard, grill for their class. And people started calling and saying, hey, would you be available to do, our son or daughter's birthday party and cater for, we have a few couples coming in this weekend. Will you be able to cook for us or to cater for us? And so I started a little catering company and started cooking for a lot of people. And, I hit the sort of holy grail with a couple of families that were very, very involved in fundraising and in all kinds of big things. And all of a sudden I found myself cooking, for bigger parties. And I remember the day I bought a chef coat because I needed to look, a little more professional and cook for this really, really high-end event. Mind you, I was in my, 22 years old. And here I'm cooking for this huge fundraiser. Everybody's in the talks and everybody's like, oh, this food is incredible. And who's the catering and who's the caterer? And so that was really my start. And then I just sort of abandoned, academics and said, this is the path. I want to cook. I want to do this. And I started doing these catering gigs. And at that point I told my parents, I really want to explore this and say, and my mom said, you should probably travel to Europe and kind of have a feel for how it's done and expand your point of reference and your palate and that sort of thing. And that's what I did. I ended up going to school in Italy, and the school was a slow food movement. The slow food movement created this program. It was a master's program not in cooking, but in really what they called food communications or taste analysis. The idea was that they really wanted to preserve some traditions, old traditions of quality ingredients and preserving the way, things were made, essentially. And so this program was really, really interesting because there were things like, the history of military diets on one hand, and then we'd go visit a dairy farm and see how Parmigiano Reggiano is made, and go visit canned tomato factories in the south of Italy and pasta. But it was very academic. I mean, they took this stuff seriously. It was the stuff of like, food is culture. This is this is as important as poetry and other liberal arts. I mean, this is part of the fabric of a culture and of society. And so this was kind of an eye-opening experience. And I came back to St. Louis with all these grand ideas about what food could do, and that's when I started that. I basically started that business with that friend, that salami business.
That is an amazing path. There's something. What strikes me is the influence of your family and all this. For some reason, that's just sticking to me. Just because, we started this conversation with you describing, the choreography of the businesses, right? You're creating an experience, and then I heard you talk about your mom saying, the food is nothing. I got the food part down, but it's everything else around it that's really important, and how that thread has stayed consistent, and how you lived it and experienced it in Italy with food being culture. And I mean, my brain was like, I was imagining myself being there, having the freshest of the fresh, seeing the cheese being made, and that's just an amazing. That's the experience, right? That's the experience that you try to recreate for people. And it's what will bring me back. It's what brings me back to certain locations is the ability to have the full experience. So I really appreciate that. Well, speaking of family, or just not necessarily just family, but if you could talk a little bit. You mentioned earlier you came to St. Louis when you were in high school, but if you would mind sharing a little bit about your background, like where you grew up, kind of anything you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. I mean, so I was born in Israel. I grew up in a small town just east of Tel Aviv. Pretty typical, upper middle class, childhood. My father was a professional. My mom was a culinary educator, like I said. I felt like we had a very open household, in the sense that my parents really wanted us to explore, and so we traveled. Even as kids, we traveled to Europe a lot and saw a lot of, got to see a lot of things that we took for granted, but people probably my age didn't get to see. Going to eat like interesting fancy restaurants and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, we moved there, like I said, because of my dad's job. I mean, I was 16, almost 17 years old, and it was definitely a culture shock coming to St. Louis. It felt like a resort for the first year, seeing geese and we had a little pond right behind our house, and it was kind of, wow, this is so idyllic. And even though I came from a small town, Israel is so dense and small that it anywhere you go, it feels urban. Almost anywhere you go. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just loud, and you hear the public transportation everywhere you are, and there's this, you're out a lot, and it just felt so green and idyllic. What else can I tell you about me? Background. I mean, I don't know if it's even relevant to this conversation, but I was a very opinionated teenager, and was very politically active. And part of the impetus of staying here in the States was my refusal to go serve in the Israeli military, which is mandatory. And I was able to kind of postpone it. I did have a day at court with the Israeli government, and I just don't want to do it. But so I was sort of coming back to the States after this ordeal. I should digress. I finished 2 years in college, and then had to go back to Israel to sort of handle my affairs. And it was about a year in between, and then I had to come back. And so I came back here because it's the only place I sort of now felt like as a second home. And I just stayed. I mean, there's very, very little prospects for people who don't serve in the military in Israel. It's maybe not the same now, but at that time, it's the sort of thing that everybody asks you. It's the first question everybody asks you when you apply for a job, and it was such a it's such a taboo not to serve. I mean, it's unheard of. Like, what's wrong with you? Are you ill? Are you sick? but so I just stayed and went back to college and sort of like, this is where I was. This is what I wanted to do. I mean, if that helps at all. You know what? I should talk a little more about just a cultural background. My father, as I mentioned, his family survived the Holocaust. He was born in Germany, and my mother was born in North Africa. And it's not an atypical Jewish story, Israeli story. I mean, Jews immigrated to Israel from everywhere, and but what's a little unusual about it is that those were such different cultures. One was sort of Levantine, Middle Eastern, North African, darker, if you will, warmer, and the other was sort of Eastern European, lighter, fairer skinned. And and so there were those were very conflicting backgrounds that we had to sort of navigate, but it worked, and now it's like one of the best things I have. Is the ability to say that I'm part. I'm culturally of the world. That I have all these different things that play off here. That I can connect with. A German culture because I had a German grandmother, and I could connect with, North African culture because my mom was born there, and the path that my parents took to get to Israel is kind of the stuff of movies, and so it's kind of it's not typical for a lot of Americans to hear those kinds of stories, and it gives at least me, it gives me a lot of perspective, and a lot of empathy towards all kinds of people, especially immigrants, and stories that people have to go through to be where they are, and just not take anything for granted is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you perspective. I would have a lot of pride in that too as well, that you were born out of a lot of pride of these two different cultures. Right. Yeah. Two cultures coming together and being able to tap into the best of all of that. And then plus your mom's great advice she gave to you, telling you, go to Europe. Like if you really need to explore this. And so you were able to kind of take on other cultures. And I think that's probably allowed you to be able to connect with such a wide audience, I'm sure personally and professionally through your businesses as well. I mean, that's extremely, extremely impressive. And I appreciate that. The other thing about not taking things for granted, I worked at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts. That was my first job out of grad school. And I had a colleague there who was always working really hard, like all of us, but she was just always a little bit more high-strung and stressed out than the rest of us. And I remember just kind of just being a young new professional and kind of being irritated by her high-strung type A personality, because not everybody at the institution was like that. She specifically was like this. Mm. And one day we were doing some team building, and she said, my grandparents survived the Holocaust. And the one thing that they always shared with me and my siblings was not taking things for granted and making the most out of this life experience. And when she said that, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I thought, well, that is perspective, right? Yeah. People who faced one of the worst things this earth has ever provided, and yet learned to pass on lessons and perspectives. And I learned a lot that day from her as well. So I can appreciate not taking things for granted. At least that was another life lesson for me that I learned from a colleague, Rachel, which was really, really impressive.
Yeah.
So we're going to take just a few seconds break, and then we're going to get into the big question.
Okay.
All right, so Ben, this is the Best Worst Thing podcast. And one of the things we always ask our guests to do is I always ask our guests, me and my team back here, as you see us, If you don't know, folks at home, we have a live studio audience today. Say hello, everybody. All right, thank you. Anyway, this is the time where we ask our guests, still saying we, to share a personal or professional story of a setback. And so we want to know, the listeners want to know, what was the situation? How did you get through it, and what did you learn along the way that they can take away with them? So Ben, Poremba, what is your best worst thing?
So I'm going to tell you a few interrelated stories, but it's the same narrative of basically the theme is business failure, is being so self-assured that because I was doing something right in one business, if I just follow the kind of path or follow the same kind of format, I should be successful in others. As it was kind of when I opened Olio and Elia and then Shuket, there was sort of this sense of invincibility, right? I created this, a little hubris, not a little, a lot of hubris. I created this. This was everybody that I spoke to about this before I actually opened up told me I was a madman and this would never work. And why would I do this? And of course, my wife was pregnant at the time. Mind you, we opened the restaurant 2 months after my son was born. We moved right at the same time to a new place. And so people say that the three biggest stressor in lives are having children, especially your firstborn, opening a business and moving. And we've done all those in the same week or in the same couple of weeks. But so speaking of being in the zone, right, from earlier, I was really in the zone. Mm-hmm. But so I opened these places up, and now we're getting all these accolades and awards and tons of exposure. And you feel like, everybody's on your team, everybody's rooting for your success, because it was kind of an unlucky story. It was a great, it was a triumphant story. This is, this kid with big balls came in and opened these places up against all odds, and he's doing well. And, I remember my father-in-law, who was completely against the idea of opening those restaurants here. Maybe it was 3 or 4 months after we opened, saw all the cars in the parking lot. And he said, Ben, there is 3 or 4 cars that are worth, more than what, and he goes, I think you're going to be just fine, or something along those lines. But so the idea was, okay, I'm going to do another business now. I'm hot, and I opened this business. And like I said, I opened a fried chicken, kind of a Southern style restaurant. And it failed. And it failed because I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared for the growth. There was a whole new set of challenges that didn't exist before, and I just wasn't prepared, really. I wasn't prepared mentally, and I wasn't prepared to deal with setbacks. And I had a lot of setbacks, and they were foreign to me. I didn't recognize that phenomenon of me not getting what I wanted at that point. Sounds like I was kind of sort of drunk on hubris and on vanity, but I wasn't. I mean, it was really, I wasn't arrogant. I thought this is supposed to work, and why isn't it? Mm-hmm. Almost like a logical dissonance in my head. It's like, what? We're doing everything right, or I thought I was doing everything right, but I wasn't doing everything right, and I had to kind of pull back and that really, I took up sort of a gut punch, and I had to go through the exercise of really reflecting on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and I quickly closed down that restaurant and reopened another in its stead, which is Nixta. It still exists, 6 years later, and that restaurant did amazingly well when I opened up. And we got tons of accolades, national accolades. It sort of saved me financially those first few months. And you would think that I learned from this first experience, or maybe slow down with the idea of, pursuing new businesses. But no, it just actually almost reinforced the idea that maybe that thing was an anomaly.
Oh.
That wasn't because of me. That was because of other circumstances. And I pursued this mega restaurant, a restaurant that was a big restaurant in Clayton. I'm like, I'm gonna play, with the adults now. I'm gonna go to sort of the center of wealth and business in St. Louis and open a 10,000 square foot restaurant, which is way bigger than everything I've done before. And I sat down and negotiated a great deal and all those things and borrowed a ton of money, and that restaurant did not work out. And so I got another serious punch in the face, and I lost a lot of money, and I felt like a failure. I felt like, shit, this is why would I even engage myself in such an adventure? And it just didn't work out. And you know what? The restaurant was working fairly okay, and we kept it open for 3 years. But on the 6th month, I already kind of knew that things weren't working right. And 2.5 years to close it down, because I had so much ego, and I had to kind of do it on my own terms, so to speak. But I gotta tell you something crazy that I did. I opened another restaurant, right, closing that one. And I opened a tiny restaurant, which is the Benevolent King, still around. And I looked at all the mistakes I made with those 2 openings of the previous restaurants. And I'm like, what did I do wrong there? What, and I sort of realized that what I did wrong was they weren't the reflections of me. Those restaurants I created them. I enjoyed creating them. They were personal, but they weren't a reflection of what I know and what I know how to do best. And so that the Benevolent King, that the latest restaurant I opened, as I was closing that big restaurant, I opened it on the cheap. I did all the work in there myself. It was therapeutic, and I cooked there, and it's the most unlikely restaurant because it's the tiniest kitchen ever. You can't really do a lot of stuff there. And you know what food I cooked there? I cooked my mom's food. And my whole concept was, this is the food I cook at home. And we named it the Benevolent King because it was kind of named after the Moroccan king that during World War II is known to have saved many, many Jews by refusing to allow the Vichy government, pick them up. And it was kind of a personal restaurant, but I'm like, I'm loosely cooking Moroccan food, but no, I'm really cooking the food that I love, and not all of it was my mom's food, but in a way it was all my mom's food, because it's the kind of stuff that were very, very, things that were very personal to me. I mean, I put a lot of spin on things, but it was such a therapeutic experience, and it was successful. I mean, until the pandemic, but it was successful. And so it was a nice closure, because not only did I closure in the sense that I didn't want to stop opening restaurants. That's the thing that gave me the most satisfaction. That was my creative outlet, and the prospect of not doing it again just because I failed twice, just was really stressful for me, depressing even, and doing that restaurant on my own terms and recognizing that I can still do it and still be good at it was a lot of joy. But yeah, to your question, to the big question, why was those 2 restaurants? I mean, I lost money, I lost time, I've experienced some health issues because of it. I've gained weight. I've all those big stressors. It was the best schooling I've ever had. I'm so much nicer and so much more relaxed and so much more, down to earth than I was. I mean, I was sort of type A personality. I go. Let's do the next thing. And, And now I'm just going to do the next thing when I'm ready for it and when I want to do it. And so there you have it.
Man, I really appreciate that. There's so much to reflect off of that, Ben. First of all, you got me kind of emotionally. I was like, oh, back away from the mic, Josh. No whimpering in the mic. when you mentioned, kind of it was your mom's food, or at least something that represented a place and a time, and even the story behind the namesake for why you chose that name. Very powerful. But what really kind of stands out to me is this idea of the two failures weren't a reflection of you. And once you kind of went back to your basics, it confirmed that you didn't lose it. You still had it, right? You still had it.
Yeah.
Right. You still had the touch, maybe the hubris was changed a little bit and it shifted, but it was more focused, and the more you know yourself and the more you act in alignment with yourself, the less dissonance you have altogether, and the more authentic you can be, and then good work happens, and we hear it time and time again by people from so many industries, and for you to get a chance to live it and it's still standing 6 years later is impressive. Again, now it makes me want to check out that restaurant. Now I checked out I checked out some of your spots, but now I'm adding to my lists of things, and so I really appreciate that, you sharing that.
Yeah.
The multiple failures. And I don't want to. I know we'll have to wrap up soon here, but I just want to kind of talk about that. It's an interesting thing how, in retrospect, you've been able to reframe what the industry may look at as multiple failures as a great opportunity for you to learn, grow, shift, change your perspective, personality, be a lot more relaxed, calm, nice to people, etc. And I think that's really at the core of this podcast is some version of a reframe. I know there's some experiences that people have out there that you just can't reframe, right? Some tragedies people go through that are just impossible to reframe. But these are humbling, tough experiences that had real consequences. And in retrospect, taking a little time to figure out, well, what's the good thing I got out of this? Like, why is this a good thing ultimately? Seems to me like you did that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you almost appreciate it. There's maturity about looking back and saying, it was tough at the time, but it made me feel vulnerable, which actually was healthy for relationships with other people, seeking help, asking for it, asking for guidance, and not even that, even asking for support and asking for a hug or asking for just, and understanding that, and recognizing there's people around you that means shit to them. Like my business failure meant nothing to my wife. I mean, she didn't care. I mean, of course she cared, but I didn't change in her eyes. It didn't reflect badly on me. It wasn't a personal failure. I didn't do some egregious act that she was all of a sudden ashamed of me for. And I'm like, you know what? People fail in business, and some people fail in business and come out of it triumphant. And it was almost, like I said, it was in the big scheme of things, it was almost necessary. Like, so yeah, throughout the time, there is, as a young kid in Israel, you have to take Bible classes, and I remember the story of Samson, who everybody knows about the hair and, Delilah cutting his hair off, he's losing his power. But there is to me, a more interesting story about Samson of, as a young man, he ran into a lion and, on his way home, and had to fight a lion, and he took over the lion and killed it and slaughtered it and whatnot, and left the lion, laying down there on the road. And a few weeks later, he walked the same path, and he saw kind of an amazing thing. He saw that there was a beehive building in the carcass of the lion that he killed. And he went there and was able to collect honey, and he jarred it and he brought it back to his mom. And his mom asked him, where did you get that honey? And, the only thing I think he said was, in Hebrew, it says, me'ez yitzeh matok, which meant from something horrible or terrible, something sweet came, and I'm not a biblical scholar. It's not like I'm using this, but it's true. Good experiences come from traumatic experiences or from bad experiences. If you allow yourself to reflect and allow yourself to deal with them, confront them. Financially, emotionally, all the different ways that you need to confront things. So, like I said, for me, it was important to do. We'll go through, So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great reminder and a good note to end on. If people want to get a hold of your company, do you mind sharing the best ways for people to follow you or to get a hold of your company?
So a little bit of shameless self-promotion, not selfless.
Yes,
shameless. So my website is bengelina.com. That is bengelina.com. There you'll find all of our restaurants, ability to make reservations. My couple of little retail stores. We have a little market and a little thrift store. But there's also a cute section there with stories. These are things that I write about, just whatever. So you can also find me on Instagram, Poremba. You can see my kids. You can see the stuff I cook at home. You can see, you can follow my travels and that sort of thing. That's about it.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for your time. And
well, thank you so much for having me on.
It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Best Worst Thing podcast. I'm your host, Josh Olio. Music is produced by Josh One. You can follow him at Boomnote on Instagram and Twitter, and Josh One on Spotify. Our episodes are edited by Cooled Jets Music. You can follow him at Cooled Jets Music on Instagram. Our marketing is designed by Francesca Daniels. You can find her at FrankandKitty24 on Instagram. And our overall design is by Inspired Design with Ryan Daniels. You can find them at getinspired.design on Instagram. Thank you for listening to The Best Worst Thing.
This one's for the good times and this one's for the bad. This one's for the day that was the best we ever had. This one's for my good friends and this one's for my foes. The ones who get up on your skin and